All right, everyone, welcome to your do phase. So this video, I'm going to essentially talk about the do phase as a whole, or what this section of your chapter 4 is like as a whole, but you might have some additional instructions of how to approach the do phase in your Canvas course, such as an assignment about outlining your do phase section versus actually drafting it and revising it and finalizing it. A heads up that this is a section that you will get started with in 8:15, and you will make sure it's all written up and finalized pretty early on in 8:16. So your do phase is a level 2 heading. You should take note that the level 2 heading ahead of the do phase is the plan phase. And this is all under the level 1 heading of implementation. So we're narrating your actual implementation of your PDSA cycle. Purpose of this section is to provide a detailed narrative of your actual PDSA implementation experience and data collection processes. So I know earlier you already wrote about your measures in your instrument section. That's just talking about the actual measures and actual instruments. It was not a section about how you actually implemented those and the story of data collection and the who and the what and the when, right? That's what you do here in the do phase. So the do phase is all about your data collection process and the actual implementation of your change idea. It captures both what happened as planned and what emerged unexpectedly, because that always happens in this type of research, serving as the foundation for your subsequent analysis and learning that will come in the study phase. So of all the sections of your implementation, the do phase is probably going to be your longest. You're actually narrating your change idea, like what you actually implemented. So it might be anywhere from 6 to 10 pages, including your narrative and your reflections. So content overview, the what, you'll provide a chronological narrative of your implementation experience. So that means that you're going to kind of go from start to finish, from the very beginning of your do phase to the very end of your do phase, describing your data collection process as it unfolded, and then reflect on key aspects of your implementation, including fidelity, adaptations, and lessons learned about the change process. Tone, use past tense, write with narrative richness and authentic detail, maintain first-person narrative, focus on implementation actions and data collection activities rather than analysis. You might be tempted to share some of your data collection processes and the data that you collected and immediately give us your analyses or your interpretations, your findings. Hold off on that. You will talk about that in your study part, in your study section, okay? So the narrative strategy and organization, do use level 3 headings to organize. This is going to be a big section, and you want to tell us about all the different facets or aspects, elements, sections of your do phase. Everybody's do phase is probably different, but you probably have chunked yours in some form or fashion. So use those level 3 headings to organize. You're writing a detailed chronological account. Should read as a rich story of your change work and practice, focusing on what happened, how participants engaged, and how you collected data as the events unfolded. So what was the story of your implementation of your change idea? And then how did you also collect data along the way to document whether or not change was happening, right? Some key elements or key aspects to address. Implementation launch and chronological timeline of events. So the actual initiation of your thing, your change idea, right? How participants actually engaged with and responded to the change. So you've gave us a snapshot of who your participants are in your participant section. Now you're like giving us a little bit of like the play-by-play of how they engaged in your change idea. Your data collection process as it unfolded in real time, meaning like give us the chronology. Don't tell us about the data collection processes that happen at the end of your do phase and change idea before you even tell us how you started, right? So it should read kind of from start to finish. So try to organize it that way. Any real-time adaptations or decisions you made during implementation, challenges, setbacks, and unexpected developments that might have occurred, how the implementation period concluded, and your overall experience. And consider whether you want to use a table or figure to support your narrative. Here in this section, because this section's so big, you never want to use a table or a figure to share everything about your do phase that takes the place of the narrative. Like we do want to hear some of the details about it, but use it more so as support. something that can be easily skimmed to get a sense of your due phase and things that happened without it taking up, without just the table being the primary narrative, right? So this is mostly a narrative section. Tables and figures can support your narrative. Cautions, I mentioned this already. Don't share your findings or results just yet. You can include snippets of quotes from participants or stakeholders if they help with the storytelling nature of your report. But keep these limited. You'll prioritize quotes and insights into your data or like your measures in your study phase. So, there's a way to narratively share the implementation of your due phase and capturing quotes from participants or snippets, or really refer back to your research or journal and some of the notes that you took. You might have had some like commentary throughout. You can include those, but include them in such a way that they help paint the picture of your change implementation. Do not write up a whole bunch of quotes as if you're sharing your findings and analysis. You will do more of that in your study section. So really only incorporate some of those snippets that help bring your due phase to life. Okay, so there'll be fewer in between than they will be in your study section. Avoid being a robot when reporting what you accomplished during this phase. So keep a storytelling tone to your report, reminding the reader that you're a human being engaging in improvement work. Not that you need to tell your reader, I'm a human being engaging in improvement work, but it's just incorporating that first person narrative and storytelling so that we understand that like the realities and the realistic unfolding of your due phase and your change idea in real time. Now, this section, the key aspects to address, although they look, fairly brief here, this is where you're probably going to share a lot about your due phase and your change idea, like the actual elements of it, what each session of your due phase looked like, or if you were training people or you were engaging in interviews, maybe you had certain interventions that you were this is where all of that richness is shared. So this section is pretty big. You want to decide on some level 3 headings that are really going to support your support your story. Some of the, or maybe I should say support your report. In some of your outlining activities, there are going to be some sample outlines and how you can use headings to signal certain things. And you want to be consistent with your approach of how you use your headings. You want to be consistent with how you organize. Are you organizing based on time? Specifically just time oriented? Are you organized based on activity? Did your due phase have different phases? How are you choosing to organize this section? So do attend to some of these sample outlines that are provided for you so you have a sense of what this section can look like. You will conclude this section with reflections on the due phase. And this reflection should be a little bit heftier than your plan reflections because this phase is really big. I imagine that for many of you, your plan phase was kind of small in comparison to your due phase. So use at least 3 of the following reflection questions. You might incorporate all of them, but use at least 3. Make sure your paragraphs are well organized. So here are some of the reflection questions from your due phase. Remember, your narrative of your due phase is all about summary, detail. It's descriptive. You're talking about the actual implementation of your change idea, how you collected data, what those surveys were like, what the interviews were like, not about the interviews themselves or the surveys themselves. You already talked about those in measures and instruments, but the actual unfolding of them. Let's say you had a focus group empathy interview, then you might be painting the picture of like the conference room that you were in and how that interview unfolded, and maybe some snippets that help bring that to life and what you talked about and why, how long it was, how you collected that data, etc. Again, you'll talk about your analysis in the next section. But some of the reflection questions when you get to this phase, where this section of your due phase, is you're now entering into this critical thinking and reflection. If your narrative is like you being really in it and storytelling about all the details, your reflections, we should feel the tone that we should get a sense of as the reader is that you're now taking a step back. You have a little bit of space from what you did, and you're reflecting on how it all went. So here's some guiding questions. How closely did your actual implementation align with your original plan? And what does this reveal about change work in your context? So I'm not going to be surprised if you had to make some changes or if it didn't pan out as you had planned, maybe for the better or maybe for the worse. I don't even know if that matters, but it's just going to be different. That's great and okay. The goal is to talk about that. The goal is to be transparent about that and outline that. What did you learn about yourself as a change agent through this hands-on experience? You know, this do phase, this implementation is kind of all you, right? This is initiated. You might have had some support with stakeholders, but this is it. This is your dissertation practice. How did stakeholder responses inform your understanding of organizational dynamics in the change process? This question might relate to this phase or not, depending on how your stakeholders or how your participants were engaging with your change idea, especially if you have this participatory nature to your project. What decisions did you make about adapting versus maintaining fidelity to your plan? So fidelity meaning like you're kind of following your plan to a T versus you might have adapted, or you might have adapted in order to maintain fidelity, the sense of like honor and ethics to the actual implementation of your plan. What would you do differently if implementing this change idea again? And if you remember my little soapbox from your plan phase, is that dissertation committee members, those who are really interested in change in organizations, we are constantly asking ourselves, what can we do differently? Right? This is a program in leadership and innovation. We were talking about improvement. So we should always be asking ourselves, like, how can we improve? We are not going to assume that one change idea and the improvement that we try to make is it. Like, we can always refine that. And so this is particularly a really helpful question to answer and to outline in your dissertation. And I won't be surprised if you're asked about this in your dissertation defense. Some of the detail level, you want to think about providing really rich, specific details about your implementation experience, again, while maintaining participant confidentiality. Include concrete examples, save analysis and interpretation for the study phase. Focus here on accurate description of what actually happened. What did you do for your change idea? What did you implement? That's what you're focusing on. Writing tips, you're using level 3 headings. Again, making sure that there's always something between your level 2 and your level 3 heading, right? So that probably means that you have a level 2 heading of the do phase. You have some level 3 headings. That means you have an introductory paragraph, right? That is somehow giving the roadmap of the section and how it's organized. So you're helping your readers out along the way. Make sure that you always have writing between headings. You never see 2 different level headings just next to each other without text in between. Use storytelling techniques to make your implementation come alive. Specific examples, concrete details rather than general summaries. You can provide general summaries, but then make it come to life with some of those concrete examples or snippets of quotes. Be honest about implementation's challenges, setbacks, unexpected developments, or how you adapted things. Focus on actions and events rather than analysis or interpretation. Again, we'll get to analysis and interpretation in the study phase. Separate description, main narrative from reflection, subsection for clarity. You might be tempted to offer some little nuggets of reflection throughout, in which you can, but don't get deep into reflection until you get to that reflection section. Yeah? Show the human side of change work, and remember that rich implementation stories provide the foundation for meaningful analysis in the study phase. We are only going to be able to create the sense of context and understanding for your findings, your results, your findings. Was this thing, did this thing create change? Was this thing an improvement, right? In order to be able to understand your answers to those, like the responses, the answers to your main inquiry questions, your findings, your results, we need to understand the context of your actual change idea. So that's what the do phase is all about, or that's what this section is all about. So with that, there are no, I don't have any sample things right here in this guidebook, but there might be additional examples for you to take a look at or to look over. But plan this section really well. It's going to take a little while to write, but the storytelling narrative writing aspect of it usually means that we can write a little bit fluidly, like you're recollecting what happened. I strongly recommend that you pull up your researcher journal, or have your researcher journal nearby, and like take moments to pause and be like, what was it like to be there in week 2? You know, you're writing about this weeks after some of this happened. What was it like to be back there amidst it? How can you really share, really like show your audience? You're trying to also, you're showing your audience not only everything about your change idea, but it's almost written in a way where you're trying to persuade us that you engaged in this like rigorous change idea. We're taking a look at like, these are the juicy details. If someone's picking up your dissertation to read about this change idea that you implemented, they want to read this section. It's the do section that they're going to give us all the details of what you actually did. Probably the next thing they're going to be interested in reading is your study section. What were some of your findings? The other things get a little hazy and kind of fall to the background, but like this is where everybody wants to jump to. They want to jump to this section. So it's really, really important. Follow this guidebook. Take your time. Make sure that you're being meticulous about the narration of your change idea and your data collection and those data collection procedures. Again, you'll get into analysis procedures and interpretation in right there, the study phase. So that phase will come next.